We live.
Live and living color. Okay.
Okay, it's not gonna fall. Okay, good.
All right. So like I said, we're today we're studying and looking at. Last week we looked at who Jesus was, through the power that he showed and his authority that he shows demonstrating in the Gospel of Mark. Today, with the help of Rico Tice, we looked at a snippet of Christianity Explored, and now we're going to go deeper into that exploration and talk about why Jesus actually came. What was his purpose? What was his mission? And as it was discussed, the major point, the major thrust of why Jesus came was to call sinners, not righteous, not the righteous, to call sinners. And so the question that has to be asked is, if Jesus came for sinners, you really got to ask yourself, do you think and I like the way he put it, it's not if you're good enough. And I think that's how so many people think about it is, are you good enough to come to Jesus? But it's, are you bad enough to come to Jesus? Are you bad enough to where you actually need Jesus? And see, that's where we get deceived, is we start thinking that we're good enough. So that question is, do you agree that you're in danger? That you're in terrible danger? Apart from Christ,
oh God, yes.
would you say that you're in serious peril, Because this is the question that we all have to come to grips with, We all have to say to ourselves, and look at our lives. If right now a projector was connected to your heart and your head, and it just beamed it was like direct stream up on that blank wall right there, would you be happy about that, or would you potentially be scared?
I'd definitely be scared.
I definitely think I'd be scared, because I know there are things that I don't say out loud that I think, there are things that I do in my heart that I may not do, or there might just be things I do like in private sometimes, or out of the public eye, that are not necessarily savory. And I think and I can say that with confidence because I know I'm not the only one. I'm not trying to snitch on anybody, but I know, human experience lets you know that you're not the only one. The greatest men in the world, we see it all the time with politicians and things like that. These great men, they do great things, but they all have their weaknesses, whether it be women, wine, just the power itself getting to them. All these great leaders who do great things, they all have these flaws. They all have these glaring weaknesses that get them into so much trouble. And when it's exposed, the whole world comes crashing down on them, and the eyes and the fingers of judgment start going, shooting daggers. And we're all like that. We're all tax collectors. We're all judgmental, unrighteously judgmental at times. We all have, as Jesus points out in the Sermon on the Mount, we all have a big plank in our own eye, but we're telling the brother to take the speck out of his own. And it's not to say that we're not supposed to judge at all. It's not that we can't tell someone else when they're messing up, when they're sinning, but it's to get us to look at ourselves honestly as well. If I am going to tell you that you're sinning, if I'm going to be coming to you and saying that, hey man, I saw you doing something, I thought, we need to talk about this, I myself need to be able to take that same criticism. Yeah, and I'll show you an example. I just realized I had this in here still. I thought I took it out, but this is my little mini Moleskine, my little one that I carry with me. It doesn't look like this when you first get it. It's flatter, neater. But this is, over the past few years of my life, as I blog, as I write, this is a representation of about 6 years. Poems, sermons, essays. This is about 6 years of my life in here. And if someone got a hold of this, and I often say, when someone asks me, why do I keep this? One of the kids asked me the other day why I keep this. And I said, it's like a journal of my life. If someone got a hold of this, you would know how I felt on certain days. It has things here on major events, about September 11th, about, things I wrote about September 11th, things I wrote about, the day Michael Jackson died, poems and things like that I write, so it's a little piece of me, and it shows myself, and you get to know who Shaun White was as a man. But I've always said that, more importantly, if you read this, you get to see what I thought of my Savior and of Christ also, because a lot of stuff in here is geared towards that point. However, what's not in here, this is not complete. There's nothing in here necessarily about my failures. Yes, you get a glimpse of that in some of the poetry, but there's nothing that's outright in here about those failures. If I had to fill up another one of these full of failures, it'd be twice as thick, and I'd probably need twice as many, right? This is not a complete representation of who I am. This is only a part. I like to say, post-Christ, this is who I am. Before, and even within, there'd still be a lot more in here that I wouldn't want people to know if I didn't want like that. And when we start talking about our failures, when we start talking to people about sin, this is one of the things that when we look at our sin, we have to take an honest assessment. We have to. And sin is so serious that Jesus compared it to plucking out eyes and cutting off hands and feet. Now, he doesn't mean you need to literally do that, but he's showing us a point, which is that love for him and his statutes should carry with it a sort of violent, if you will, vigilance to keep those laws. Sin is a serious business. Little sins, big sins. It's huge. We live in a culture where lust, let's take lust for example. That's one that gets everybody, I think, on some level. We live in a culture where lust is actually permissible. Look but don't touch, right?
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
Is that really a good policy to have, though?
Look but don't touch, because then you're thinking everything else in between.
Because you're thinking everything else in between. Looking and not touching is a horrible policy to have. And I hear, it's so accepted, because I hear women say, I don't care if my man goes to a strip club, because as long as he's coming home to me, that's fine. So you don't care.
But we talked about that. You're promoting something that should not be okay.
You are, but even beyond that, like you said, mentally. So you're okay with your husband or your spouse, whether it be man or woman,
going to look at another woman, paying.
Look at another man, look at another woman, in lust, paying for it, mind you.
And that's okay.
And then coming home to you, and you're cool with it. I mean, it's not cheap, because they're just looking. But the whole time they're looking, it's not like watching a movie. It's not like going to the circus.
It's very personal.
It's very personal. I'm not looking, if I'm looking at porn, strip club, whatever I'm doing, trust me, I'm not looking for my sheer entertainment. It's not just like, wow, what a spectacle. This is quite enjoyable. I should bring the kids sometime. That's not what this is. This isn't even a moment you really want to share with anybody else. Because in those moments, if you live in a fallen past like I have, in those moments, you don't really care who else is around you. You're not thinking about that. Okay? It's just not there. You're thinking about you and what you're after in that moment. And at that moment, that object is there, and you're looking at it. And I'll show you a couple things here. And the first one is going to be in James. And that's where James talks about sin. And James paints a pretty good picture here of why Jesus uses. I think it's a good elaboration on the imagery that Jesus uses.
James.
Hang on, I'm getting there. Hang on. Let's see. I'm getting there. James 1 and it's verse 15. Or actually let's start a little bit up above that. Let's start in verse 13. Okay? This is what it says. James 1:13 through 15. It says, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death."
I used to think that back in the day. A
What?
lot.
Think what?
Like if I was gonna, have sex with somebody that God was helping me out. Well, if I'm getting it, it must be him. Because if I wasn't, then I wasn't. But
Right.
that just
But
proves.
that's because you had a very warped view of God. That God was just there merely to pleasure you. For your good pleasure. Not that you were here for his good pleasure. That you were to live for his pleasure and his glory. And see how we twist that.
Mm-hmm.
So what had happened is, and you didn't even realize this, you had flipped your roles around. You see what I'm saying? You were God. God was here to serve you. Like you said, you judged it on whether or not, if that happened, then God was serving you.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
That was for your benefit. And that's what the...
Because I put that in the very good thing category.
Because sex is a good thing in its proper context. Outside of its context, it's drastically horrible. As you come to find out.
Yeah.
As it kept going. But I like this verse because the verse makes you understand how it works. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death.
Yeah.
So when you're looking, there it is. He compares it to childbirth, right? A seed is planted, and it grows. You feed it, you nurture it, but you keep going back to it. You keep going to the well. It's just like a child in a mother's stomach. It grows and grows. As that mother eats, the child eats. The mother eats, the child eats. And that's sin, because you're not starving it. You're feeding it. So you lust. And you look. Well, one little look ain't going to hurt. And you go back. Whatever.
This is the married woman. And this is the married man going to the strip club because his wife said it was okay.
Right. And so, or even if she doesn't say okay, because a lot of times with a lot of what people don't know won't hurt them. That's huge in our society. What somebody doesn't know won't hurt them. Little white lies, little things, well, what no one knows don't hurt them. So I go out with my guys, I hang out, do this, go home. I'm a family man. I take care of my kids, I love my wife, do this, do that. And we're speaking from a man's perspective here because we're men, but this works the same way with women too. Doing things. Maybe I'll talk to the girl at work. My wife doesn't have to know. Let's break it down to more practical. Let's talk about somebody at work you might know. You're talking to her at work. Yes, it's a little flirtation, but a little flirtation never hurts. Lets me know I still got it. Lets me feel good about myself. She feels good when I talk to her, and it's okay. It's all good. It's cool. And you're talking, and you're just talking. And then next thing you know, you're going to lunch together. But it's okay because we're coworkers, and that's what coworkers do. I'm being a good coworker. I'm just going out having a little lunch. That's all I'm doing. No big problem. Then me and my wife have a little argument. Okay, well, I'll talk to so-and-so at work about it. Maybe I'll get her woman's perspective. Because after all, she's a woman, and it's great because, hey, it's okay. We're co-workers. She's a buddy. We're friends. We dap it up. Whoop, whoop, no problem. And we're good. And we're going there, and we're doing this. And then, oh, you're such a good guy, though. And this, man, she really makes me feel good. I love talking to her because when I'm having problems over here, it's okay. What you don't realize is that sin is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're slowly but surely creeping over into adultery because now you are emotionally starting to gravitate towards somebody who you're not committed to when you have somebody at home. So now you're not even trying to work out the problem till the next thing you know, you're not trying to do that. You're not trying to work it out anymore at home. Now when the wife starts tripping, you go call so-and-so. Now when the wife's tripping, you go watch a little porn. Now when the wife's tripping, you go to the strip club. And so now you have gone full blown, and then now the next thing you know, you're still talking to so-and-so at work, you're still doing the lust thing on the internet, you're still going out with your buddies to the bars, and now one day, old girl from the job gives you a nice little peck on the cheek. Maybe she says something that makes you think that something can happen, because this whole time what you've been doing is because you didn't cut it off, and because you knew that she was kind of sweet on you in the first place, because there was flirtation going on there the whole time, you did nothing to stop it. So now you're allowing her to enter into sin, you're entering the sin, and now it has been conceived. And now that peck on the cheek goes to a peck on the lips, and now it comes to a secret romance that's going all haywire, because now you guys are involved in an intimate relationship, not just spiritually and mentally, but also physically. And now she wants more, and you know you can't do that because now you'll lose everything. So now she's got to go a step further, and she's got to pursue you harder, and now she's got to out you, and then your whole world comes crashing down. The end. And that's a true story because I know it's happened on more than one occasion. Okay? That's what that verse is saying. Don't believe me? Let's just say, for the hardened hearted who say, yeah, but that's that dude. I'm not him. Because men are like this especially. So are the ladies. Ladies, don't get too comfortable. I know when to cut it off. I know when to put a stop to it, right? Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Let's go all the way back.
So I'm guessing Genesis.
We're going to Genesis.
Genesis 4?
Nope, we're going to be before that. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning, though. Just so no one can say that, and this is what the scripture is good for. It's good for proof. Good to knock down any faulty thinking that tries to prop itself up against
So Genesis
the word of
1
God.
then.
This is Genesis 3.
Sorry, 3.
And here in Genesis 3 we see, and we're going to start.
The fall.
We're going to start at verse 1. And just listen to how this goes. Alright? Remember what we just read in James, right? Desire is conceived until the desire becomes is there and it's conceived. And once conceived,
it grows into death.
Sin, and sin brings forth death, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Watch this. Now, the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God actually say, 'You shall not eat of any tree in the garden'?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die.'" But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Now here comes the kicker. So, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a